Hi, it's Rose from Getting Grounded in the Garden. Good to see you again. Okay, it's that time of year to winterize our canna plants and our elephant ears. At least I think it's that time of year. I live in Zone 7 in southeast Pennsylvania. These cannas look like they're almost ready to be dug up and stored for the winter. It's one of those cases where we can say it's been a very 2020 year. A few weeks ago, back in October, we had some really cold nights. Halloween night was really cold, and we did have a little frost on the ground, but I was waiting for a hard frost. Now, the past week or so, it's been warm. We've actually had temperatures in the 60s and 70s, and when I looked up the frost dates for Pennsylvania, it looks like we won't be having another frost or a temperature down to about 36 degrees until possibly the last day of November. So I really don't want to wait until then to dig up these cannas, but for now I want to show you what to do. So I'm using my judgment. Since this canna is in a planter, that means the soil is above the ground, so this does get colder than any cannas that would be in the ground. Below soil level, it's warmer. So for right now, I would not remove any of my cannas from the ground. So here's what I'll do with this one. I'll tip it over onto this old sheet here and just slide it out. So I'm sliding it out so I can take a look at the roots and the soil and the bulbs. Actually, the bulbs of cannas are called rhizomes. So let me tease away at it, open things up, see what's going on here. You really do want to wait until the first hard frost because the cannas need that time. They need that first hard frost so that they can be signaled that it's time to shut down for the winter. If you dig them up and store them prematurely, you could be interrupting that whole process. They're not ready, they're still growing. But I used my judgment. In this case, they're brownish, and I wanted to get this video out to you before you try doing yours. Look at these cannas here in this container. There is no way that they are ready for winterization, so I might be waiting until at least the beginning of December to dig these up and dry them and store them. So you can see there are a lot of roots here, but the rhizomes stay close to the top of the soil. Now these canna plants are a smaller variety. So if you were to plant these again, you would plant them about 2 to 4 inches below the soil line. If you're planting the taller ones, you'd plant them much lower, 6 to 8 inches below the soil line, just for stability reasons. We're going to keep teasing. I don't want to cut anything yet. Getting out as much soil as possible. Okay, now I can cut. I just cleaned all of my tools and now I'm spraying them with some rubbing alcohol. It's really important. It seems like I'm being a pain in the neck with spraying tools all the time, but it's really important. You don't want to spread any diseases from one plant to another. Okay, we're cutting off all the roots. We don't need those. I'm just cutting the long ones right now. I can take care of the shorter ones later. And I'm looking for a place where there might be a natural division. So right through here is where I think I'll cut. Nice sharp cut there. And I want to make sure that I leave a section that has 2 or 3 little bulbs on it. Okay. It's hard for you to see, but there's one little bulb here. There's a bigger one here. And there's another little one shooting up right here. That's good. I want to keep at least 3 on there. Now, I could rinse this off if I wanted to, but you really don't have to at this point. Let's check the other one. I see 1, 2. I only see 2 on here, but I have a suspicion there might be another one tucked away in the soil. But 2 might be okay. So at this point, since the stems are not drooped over yet, I'm going to lay these out on another sheet, bring them into the garage, and let them dry out for a few days. At that point, I will remove more of the roots and more of the soil. You really don't have to remove all the soil. The plants are used to that. They live in soil all the time. To us, it's dirty, but to them, it's normal living conditions. So I will lay these down to rest on another sheet and bring them into the garage. Now this extra soil I can put back into the planter. I'm going to add some potting soil and some compost to it, and this pot will be ready for next year. I can leave it outside since it's not one of those hard ceramic planters. So let's go ahead and add. I can put the perennials right back in there. They will decompose. The roots. Let's add a little compost. There's some leaves from the woods in there. Potting soil. And try to mix it together. And we'll leave it for the winter. So next year we'll have a nice media for the plants to grow in. I really enjoyed having the Cannas out here this year. They have such a beautiful tropical flair and great colors. These flowers, I had 2 different kinds in here. Somehow they melded together. But these flowers were red and orange, just beautiful. Okay, that's done. This extra soil I can add to my compost pile. Now let's just pretend that these have sat in the garage on this towel or blanket for a few days. You can put them in a wheelbarrow or wherever. Okay, so if they don't seem dry enough, let them sit longer. If you've had rain before digging these up, you might have to wait till up to a week for them to dry out. So, okay, let's just say that they're dry. How about if I take this one? This seems like the stronger of the 2, and I don't want to sacrifice both of them. So let's just say it's dry and it's been sitting in the garage. I'm going to cut it down to just leave nubs for stems. And at this point I can cut off more of the roots. We just want to leave the rhizome. By this point the cut parts will have calloused and dried. So they should be fine. The sharper tool you use, the better. That means that the cuts will heal much faster. Okay. If you're also looking for rot or any problems like that, if I see rot on anything, I discard it. There's another thing you can do. You can toss them around in some fungicide, insecticidal powder, and that will help. But if I had to do that, I would store these separately than the other bulbs. You just don't want that rot to spread. Okay, the next thing you'll do, let's pretend this is dry. You get a box or a container of some sort. A paper bag is another good option. And you lay some newspaper in the bottom, or you can use shredded paper. Hey, have you noticed that many of us don't get newspapers anymore, so it's hard to have that extra newspaper for recycling or for making compost? but shredded paper works just as well. Or you can use some dry sand or vermiculite or peat moss or sawdust or even some unscented pet bedding. That will do the job. So you make a layer of that in the bottom of the box, and then you will put your rhizomes in the bottom, and you will keep them separated in there. Let's just say in this box we could probably fit about 8 of them. Okay, if we had another layer, we would put more paper on top, and then another layer of rhizomes, and then another layer of paper. You want to end up with a light layer of the paper or media that you're using. You close the box, and then on your calendar you put the date. 3 weeks from now you want to check on these and make sure that they're not too dry, they're not too wet, they're not getting any fungus or mold. So if you see any of those things, you might have to modify what you're doing. So if they're too wet, open the box, let them dry out a little bit. If they're getting too dry, you can spray some water into the box, onto the paper or your media, and then go from there. If they look shriveled, they're dry. So next you put another date on your calendar for 1 month, and then each month you will check on these just to make sure they're doing okay. Now you want to take the box and store it in a location that will remain between 40 and 60 degrees Fahrenheit. So in my case, they're going in the garage next to an interior wall. So you walk in the garage and go all the way to the back of the garage. So in case the garage temperature gets to be about freezing, at least near the interior wall, that will stay a little warmer. So remember, they're tropical. You don't want them getting too cold for the winter. Some people put them in their basements. My basement is heated, so I can't put them down there. I don't have a really cold spot. Some people put them in their sheds. So if you live below zone 8, you'll need to store your cannas. They're a beautiful plant, but they do require some extra care. Next, I'll show you some elephant ears. Hey, before moving on, I'm showing you the list here of the steps to take for winterizing cannas. You might want to freeze frame it for later use. Okay, here we have a really nice elephant ear plant. It's actually a colocasia. In the elephant ear world, there are alocasias and colocasias. The way you can tell the alocasias is that the points point up. I always think to the almighty alocasia. And the colocasias point down. I always try to remember towards the core of the earth, colocasia. So anyway, that's a little Latin for you. Now, after doing a little contemplating, I decided I'm not going to dig this one up yet. There is a little browning on the leaves, but we do want to wait until the stems become brownish and limpish. If I take it out too early, I could be causing damage to the bulbs. Like I said, they need to go through the process of preparing for winter storage, so I'm not digging them up today. But anyway, you'll find tubers. They're more like balls when you dig them up. Hi, how you doing? So after your first hard frost, you will definitely see the stems turn brown and become very limpy. That's when you will dig them up. You want to use a pitchfork and start about 1 foot away from the plant, digging down and then inwards. You don't want to cut any of the bulbs. Dig them up and out of the soil. We do the same thing we did with the canna rhizomes. You want to clean them off with your fingers by teasing, cut off the roots, and lay them down on a tarp or something, or in a wheelbarrow. Bring them into a covered area to dry out a little more, up to about a week if they need it. And after you're sure that all the stems are brown or black, then you cut them down to about 2 or 3 inches. When you store them, it's the same thing. You use a dry media that gives some aeration, and you store them in a cool, dry place. Now, the important thing with elephant ears is that they need colder storage. Their winter temperature should be between 40 and 50 degrees, so you need a really cool spot for these. And the same thing in a box or a paper bag or a mesh bag. and do the same thing. Check them after a few weeks. If you see any rot or insects, use that powdered fungicide, insecticide, toss that all around. Toss the bulbs all around in that. You also want to check for moisture or dryness. Don't forget, if they look dry or shriveling, you spray them with a little water. If they look moist, or if you see any insect or rotted damage, remove them and replace the dry media. And don't forget to put it on your calendar. You just might forget. You go on living and you forget about your bulbs out in the garage or in the basement, so put it on your calendar. These plants cost a lot of money, so we want to take good care of them and plant them again for next year. And they reward us with their beauty, and they multiply through the season, and we get more and more plants. Sometimes we get more than we know what to do with, and we can give them out to people. So let's talk about springtime. Now in the spring, we want to wait until we're sure that we're not getting any more frost. So in Pennsylvania in zone 7, that means waiting until the end of May before we can put the bulbs or the rhizomes back into the ground. One thing to keep in mind is that the elephant ears, they like the colder storage, but then that means that they need more time to break dormancy before you can plant them outside. So the elephant ears can be taken out of the storage about a month before the end of your frost-free date, and you can plant them indoors in a container before you put them in the ground outside. It might be too much of a shock for them to go from cold storage into the ground. They need that dormancy breakage period. There's two more important things about cannas and elephant ears. When you plant them, they need lots and lots of moisture, and you'll want to add some fertilizer to the soil when you plant them in the spring and then again in midsummer. Don't give them any more fertilizer after midsummer. 2 times throughout the season will suffice. Another thing about these elephant ears, now this plant could have gotten bigger, but what happens is all these stems coming out of the ground are fighting for the same nutrients and moisture or water in the soil. So if you would cut back the biggest stems, I know it's really hard to do, especially when you have big, beautiful leaves, but if you cut those stems at the bottom, it's really easy to do, and it slices right through there like butter. If you cut a few of those back once in a while, then the other leaves will have a chance to get bigger, and the whole plant will become stronger, and you'll get more and more bulbs. So if you want more outstanding, bigger plants, try that. It really works. So I hope you learned quite a bit about canna and elephant ear winterization, and I hope you enjoy your plants as much as I do. And don't forget to see more of my gardening videos or to see some of my interviews with inspiring women. You can tune in to Just Us Grown Up Girls, 5 separate words, on YouTube. And for the gardening videos, go to the playlist called Getting Grounded in the Garden. Okay, have a nice winter. Stay warm and healthy, and I'll see you soon. Thanks for watching.